Hello everyone, Scooter here at Granville Guitars, coming to you live from the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in St. Petersburg, Florida. We're here for part 2 of this restoration project. It's a 1961 Fender Bassman. The tube label says 6G6A on this amplifier. When it came in, it was an interesting mishmash of 6G6 and 6G6A, and now I have converted it over to 6G6B in several respects, as you will see momentarily. Cleaned the front panel up just slightly. Didn't want to go too far with that. Wanted it to stay kind of original looking. Reproduction knobs on it. We'll flip it around this direction. We can begin to see some of the work that I've done. Let's start over here with our good friend, the bias supply. And I'll just get in here tight on this bad boy. Now, if you remember from our first video, someone had replaced all the components in the bias supply, but they had not done the best job of it, and they had added an adjustable component to the fixed bias, allowing you to set the bias control, which is a good concept. Execution wasn't that great. I ended up replacing this whole arrangement here with brand new components. We have the correct axial capacitors here. Resistors of the correct value and put in the right positions. A brand new rectifier, or sorry, not rectifier, but bias supply diode. And I have opted for a fixed adjustable arrangement right here with this potentiometer. What I did was I made an L bracket out of this chrome plated copper that I had laying around, and mounted it to one of the bolts for the power transformer. In this way, we get to add the adjustable component or potentiometer to our bias supply, but we do not permanently modify this chassis in any way. This can be removed at any time in the future and brought back to its original circuit design without this component, and no one should ever know that this was here. That's important on an amp of this type. If you're going to do any changes or modifications, even with the best of intentions, you still need to give yourself an out to return it to its stock form if you want. Okay, so moving along from the bias supply, which is, like I said, been modified, everything at the front end of the amplifier in this normal channel has been left alone. I ended up changing some stuff in the bass channel. The bass channel on the early 6G6s is hit and miss. It's a very strange circuit design. It places the treble control after everything else, including several stages of gain. What it ends up doing is it ends up forcing the phase inverter into cutoff. It's a very aggressive cutoff. You can actually make the signal cutoff. It'll square wave completely. So what I've gone ahead and done with this channel, and again, all of this can be brought back to stock if we want to. I've retained all the original components. I replaced the input jacks here and here, and also used some high quality Dale mil-spec resistors to kind of reduce the noise in that area of the circuit, because this channel, even in its modified state, uses two 12AX7s, both sides of the 12AX7s for its gain structure. So we want things to kind of be quiet in the front end if we can. Pots have remained the same, wire to the pots have remained the same. What I did with this channel was I wired it to 6G6B specs, similar to what you would find in one of Brian Setzer's basements. This was a complete redo of this whole chain, and for the better. It brings it along closer to what we would expect to see from a black face. So it looks a little more familiar, although there are a few subtle differences. First off, this whole arrangement's obviously been replaced here, these bypass caps and resistors. My tone stack has been replaced. If you'll recall from the first video, we had the yellow Astron here by itself, and the bass cap was actually missing. I've replaced these caps with genuine old blue sausages, which were pulled from other amplifiers over the years, and I've hung on to them. And they were just the right lead length to make sense here, so in they went. This area has also been all replaced with new stuff. Again, these 100Ks here, I went with Dale mil-spec for noise performance. You'll notice there's some carbon comps in certain positions, and there are also some carbon films in other positions. I auditioned several different types. These are the ones that sounded best to my ear. Right here, you'll notice this was, when we first looked at the amp, this capacitor here had been replaced, but it was replaced with a radial, not an axial, and kind of a cheap one at that. So that got replaced. When you redo all of this, a couple of wires have to go different places, and some other components just outside of this need to be replaced as well. You can see this wire from the treble pot, as well as this little filter network here, which is a cap and a resistor in parallel. That had to be added. Actually, it just had to be changed from its old values. This wire formerly from that pot went all the way over to here, and now this wire has been added. And if you look at the schematic, you can see exactly what I did and why I did it. Basically repositioning the treble control to make more sense with the gain structure. That also necessitates a little bit of rearrangement down here. The order of those components is a little different on the earlier amp and has to be rearranged. So this has been replaced. These two resistors have been replaced. I've left everything else as I found it. And again, I've retained all the old components. It can definitely be made back to stock again should someone desire that. The reasoning behind all of this is that when I first plugged in the bass channel, sometimes these amps sound good in the bass channel and sometimes they don't. And this one sounded less than good. It really was cutting off badly. So I rewired it to those specs, and now it sounds fantastic. The normal channel sounded fantastic from the get-go. There was nothing wrong with it, and so I left it as I found it, with the exception of that one cap. If we swing around to the rear of the amp, inside, you can see a few things that I did here. There's a 220K at the first preamp tube socket there that, if I can focus this silly thing, there we go. I still don't know how to use this thing. Anyway, that resistor got replaced once it focuses. All the other wire has been retained and remains the same. All of these sockets, everything's retained and remains the same from original. If we come along here, we'll notice that the standby switch, this guy right here, has been replaced. I replaced that. Actually, that's not the right one. This one here, the standby switch. Sorry. The standby switch was replaced. The reason for that is that it was making a fair amount of noise, and just generally, even after it was on, you could wiggle it and it would crackle a bit. So its time had come, and since that's the real power switch anyway, that needed to go away. The screen grid resistors have been replaced. The old ones were a little crusty, and as a matter of fact, were both cracked on the underside from heat over the years. So that needed to happen, and did. we go down here further, we can see that I've installed a new power cord and added the appropriate ground connection here at the transformer and wired it in. Everything else in this basic area of the amp has remained the same. Same transformers, all that sort of stuff. Now if we flip the chassis over and come back down here, you'll see that I also did, as I mentioned in the first video, all of our filter caps have been changed out. I've been going back and forth between a number of different brands. The ones I've had the most success with lately are these new JJs. I've really been happy with them. They have a very, they seem to handle pounding better than other brands that I've used, and that would include TAD and the Sprague Blue Atoms, which were the standard for many years. Spragues have become less and less dependable in my real-world experience. And I've actually had a few TADs come back after only, a few months usage. And so I started trying these JJs a couple of years back, and I have been really happy with them. You'll also notice that these resistors have all been changed out. Metal oxides, better power handling, cooler operation, etc. How does it sound? To be honest, it sounds really good. That bass channel is quite gainy and very proto-Marshall Tweed kind of grind and grit and dirt. It's lots of fun to play with. The normal channel has a nice sparkly chime to it. Not as much as you would expect to find in, say, a black-faced Fender, but certainly along the lines of what you would find in like a Tuxedo or a Tweed, and definitely very fun and very usable for a nice clean channel. You could show up to a gig with an AB box in this amplifier and pretty much cover any territory you might want to cover. Well, that's it for today, and the end of this part 2. The only other thing that remains is the cabinet. For now, I'm going to leave the cabinet with the black Tolex that it has on it, and I may have that recovered at some point. But for now, it's going to stay as it is. Anyway, that's all I know for now. If you have any questions about this or anything else we do here at Granville Guitars, please feel free to contact us. You can find us on the web at www.granvilleguitars.com. You can seek us out on Facebook. And also don't forget to check out our new blog over at WordPress, A View from the Granville Bench. That's all I know for now. Have a great day.